Hey everyone, welcome back to the RichMind Podcast. And today I have another fantastic guest with us. I have Chad Kneller. He is an ex-Army officer, and he shares a story in this podcast episode it's just a powerful story. He was stuck overseas when he was deployed, and he had to get back home for a family member that was having some medical issues, and he was literally stuck. So I encourage you to hang on for that story. That is going to be super powerful, and I think you will get a lot from it. So I'm super glad that you're here, and welcome back. And let's jump into the episode right now. Are you looking for true personal freedom? The freedom to design a life you truly desire? Then you're absolutely in the right place. True personal freedom comes from when you take 100% responsibility and control of your money and your mind. Here you're going to learn ideas, tips, and wisdom that's going to help you bridge the gap from where you are now to your dream life in the future. My name is Randy Wilson, and welcome to the RichMind Podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to the RichMind Podcast. And today I have a fantastic guest with us. Super excited about this conversation we're about to have with Chad Kneller. Chad is from Houston, Texas. He's the founder and CEO of Made for More Incorporated, a company dedicated to bridge the gap between reality and possibility for aspiring entrepreneurs. Chad served as a U.S. Army officer after pursuing a music career in the rock and roll industry. He represented the U.S. Army in 2009 in Operation Rising Star and was a top 6 international finalist. He's had the opportunity to speak in front of tens of thousands of entrepreneurs over the last 6 years and is a highly sought after sales trainer in the field of health and wellness. Chad and his wife, Jeree, have a strong passion to coach married couples to not only survive, but to thrive. Chad has 3 fantastic kids, Gavin, Ava, and Elijah. And as I mentioned, he's from Houston, Texas, and he's also an author. Finding Happy is his book. I just finished it up today. Fantastic read. Highly recommend, and I'm sure we'll get into more details about that as well. But Chad, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So I read a whole lot about you there, right at the very beginning, but can you go a little bit more in detail? Can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, a little bit more?
Yeah, so I'm Chad. I'm a former Army officer, spent about 12 years in the military, and just always have had that entrepreneur, like side of me where I've always been wheeling and dealing and just trying to do things. Even when I was really, really young, we'd throw parties and try and cover the bills at the place I rented with like 7 other people. We lived in the same place, and so very entrepreneurial, from a very young age, and just always trying to figure it out. Right. I didn't want to just always have a job and didn't feel like I was made for that. And so just always have been looking, and throughout life, I finally kind of figured it out, in some different ventures, and kind of been all over the place. And you could say I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm always open. I always love ideas. I love to be around entrepreneurs. I love to, from just have my brain to be stimulated around cool people like you. So I'm just happy to be here and have this conversation.
So I love that. Right. So we are honestly, right, relatively new to our relationship as far as getting to know each other, right? And you always have these one-liners. You always throw things in there that you always get me laughing, always get me giggling about something, right? So you did that to me even yesterday in a conversation. It just, yeah. So if I start laughing, folks, it's, Chad's just poking at me, and it's hilarious. So it's going to be, yeah, that's where I'm super excited about this conversation. So entrepreneurism, personal development, financial education, all the things that I really represent and stand for here on the show, and everything I try to produce with the RichMind Podcast. Yeah, that's where I know this conversation will resonate with a lot of folks. So let's start off with the 3 questions. I always like to start the guests with that. It always helps kind of dig out a little bit more about you, help the guest show a little bit more about yourself, but then also have the listener learn more about yourself. So first off, who has had the biggest influence on your life, Chad?
So there's been a few people for me. So number one, I would say just because of my faith, I had to put Jesus at the top every single time. And then it's been, I don't know why, but people with the name Jay, right? So it's like all these people that I think of, like Jim, you mentioned Jim Rohn, love Jim Rohn, John Maxwell, John Wooden. My first real mentor, his name was Josh Denny. And of course, I got to put my wife, Jeree, in there. So between those 5, I don't, I could just go with those 5 and be good to go.
So what do you think that is, right? I mean, is it just coincidence, you think? I mean, all these posts with
I don't know.
J-Man?
It's just funny. I realized that one day. I was like, who are the people that have influenced me the most? And I'm like, they all have their name starts with J. So whenever a J comes in my life, I'm like, oh, is this going to be another one?
Yeah, well, I don't have any J's in my life, except for I have middle names with Joe's. Does that count?
That counts
Maybe.
too.
Does that count too?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other people, and there's a lot of great authors, right? But for me, it's just those are some of the key people that have just influenced me as far as books I've read and courses I've taken and people that I've done life with, and so it's interesting.
So the connection with Jim Rohn, right? That's every time I meet someone that has a connection to Jim and John Maxwell and all the personal development greats, right? But Jim especially, right? I was just having a conversation with my wife just for lunch before we hit record here. And just talking about the influence that man's had on my life and so many others, right? It's when you think about the impact, it's almost, you can't even quantify it. I assume it's been the same way for you and your family.
Oh, absolutely. And what's funny is when you really understand Jim and you do a deep dive in all his stuff, most of all the other guys that are at the top of their game today, they're all influenced by Jim. Tony Robbins is definitely influenced by Jim Rohn. Darren Hardy influenced by Jim Rohn, like pretty much John Maxwell for sure influenced by Jim Rohn. And so it's interesting to see how big of an impact that guy had, in that entire world.
Yeah. And it seems to just keep resonating over and over and over. So a common friend that we have is Kyle Wilson. And one thing that Kyle has shared with us as a group is that Jim's intention was to be the person that just basically served other people, right? He didn't want to necessarily be the top guy or the guy known for certain things. He just wanted to, I forget exactly how it was shared, but he wanted to be the one to share with the masses, right? To have it spread, have the message spread. And obviously now he's been gone for several years now, but yeah, it's amazing to even think about how much effort and all the things that he's accomplished just in his words and his messages and that type of thing.
Yeah, he'd love to hear the stories. People, he'd teach someone and then 10 years later, he'd get the letter from them and he'd hear about how he impacted their life in such a significant way. And he was all about significance. He said it's once you've tasted significance, that success no longer satisfies. And that's just so true. And, service to many leads to greatness. And that was his goal every day, is to serve people and serve people and serve people. And he's one of the greats for sure.
Were you ever able to see him in person at all?
No, I never saw him in person. I got invited to see him a couple times and it just didn't work out. But that's one guy that I wish I would have went and seen, but I've definitely I've watched so many of his videos and listened to all the audios on repeat. I mean, they're in my hard drive in my car that I drive right now. So I've got just, probably 50, 60 hours of Jim Rohn I can access at any moment.
At any given time. It's all on my phone, right? So yeah, anytime you just feel like you just need that pickup, right? Just pop on some Jim. And yeah, it's an amazing thing how you can just hear even new things that you've heard over, thousands and thousands of times. You just pick up new wisdom. It's always so cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, appreciate that. So going to the second question then is, what has been the greatest challenge in your life and what have you learned from that, Chad?
I think for me, it's been, some people, and my wife's this way, she can make decisions and she can pivot and she can move real quick. Whereas I'm a slow, like I'll sit on something for years. Like this book, for instance, I knew I was supposed to write it about 5 years before I even started writing it. So I just kind of sat there and let it marinate. And I've learned over time just to let go of comfort. I think we all have our comfort zone bubble, and it's easy to cling to it and stay there when we know we're supposed to get out of there a little more, push a little more. So I think just letting go of the old and embracing the new, and just ready to step into it and dive into it, whenever it presents itself. That's been something that's been difficult for sure for me.
So the opportunity presents itself, right? Having the confidence and the courage and the faith to kind of just step into it as it's being presented.
Yeah, because if you don't, you miss out, right? Because it's like opportunities come along, and I think Jim Rohn used to say, rarely will a good idea interrupt you. So when a good idea does interrupt you, it's like, hey, good idea just interrupted me. What should I do with this? And if doing nothing is the same as the idea never interrupting you, right? If you do nothing. So
indecision is still a decision, right? Even
that's right. It is.
Yeah. Even though if you're just sitting there wondering, contemplating, doubting, fearing, right? All of those are just still decisions, right? All the procrastination, all the excuses, it's all keeping you from a bigger, greater life than you can ever imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. That's awesome. So one thing I always love to do with my guests is I always love the idea to try to share some nuggets of wisdom with some, whether it's just somebody that a little bit further back on the path. I always kind of, in my mind, I use the 20-year-old, right? Your 20-year-old self. We're about the same age. I just turned 49 last week. I think you're turning 50 in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Sorry to age you if that wasn't something you wanted me to share. But at the same time, we're about the same age, right?
It's fine as long as everybody thinks I look 29. It's fine as long as you're older, right? What they say. If they say I look 55 and I tell them I'm 49, then it's like wah, wah, wah.
So maybe I should have asked you that before I even shared. But hey, I apologize. But it's
No,
out
man,
there now. We can't go back.
that's right. That's right. No,
So if you could
I've
go
lived.
back to your 20-year-old self. Yeah, what is there a nugget of wisdom that you wish you would have known then?
Oh, for sure. The first thing, and it's cool is when you start having kids, you get to practice on them, right? There are experiments. So my oldest is 18 now, so I get to talk to him like I'm talking to my 18-year-old self sometimes, right? And so it's really just basic stuff. It's like continue to learn. Like leaders are learners. I'm telling my son that all the time, and he's great because he's just a studier and he's a learner and he's hungry. It's staying in the state of hungry. I think it's kind of interesting in a way because most people, I think they just kind of go through this learning stage of their life through like 12th grade, maybe 4 more years or 8 more years of college. And then it's just like, okay, I'm done. That part of my life's over. Don't need to learn anymore. Well, when you learn, you're stuck. Like you don't grow anymore. So people who have a lot of wisdom, it's because they're constantly learning, they're constantly changing, they're constantly growing. And so that's something that I want to be known for, is just be a learner and a wise person. One of my mentors, he calls me Socrates. So I guess I'm doing something right. I'm always giving him these quotes and these things. I've learned a lot of quotes over the years, and they mold you, right? They mold your philosophy. That's where everything starts. Jim would say, starts with your philosophy and then your attitude, and you build to the results and the lifestyle from there. Whereas a lot of people want the lifestyle, but they want it quick now and in a hurry, but they don't understand the process, and they don't understand it starts in the mind, that everything starts in the mind because you see it. It's funny. I was watching the Olympics one year, and the people stand there. It was I think it was the slalom skiing or something. And you could just see them standing there and their eyes are closed. And they were literally visualizing going through the whole course perfectly, because when anything happens in life, typically it happens twice. It happens first in our mind where we visualize it and we see it happening. That's why people say have dream boards, right? Have something on your wall that shows the property you're going to buy and the things you're going to accomplish, because then you're seeing it and then you're believing it and then you're putting in the work to actually achieve it. But it has to be thought through first. It's really no different than planning a 2-week vacation. We sit down, we plan it out. We're like, okay, we're going to go here on the first day. We're going to stay in this town at a hotel, and then we're going to get to Disney World, and we're going to spend 4 days there. So I got to buy the tickets, and you got to plan for this and plan for that. And it's very the predictable outcome when you do all the work up front and you visualize it and you believe it and all that stuff. It's going to happen. That's just one of my favorite quotes is by Paul J. Meyer. And he's a great guy. He's a self-made billionaire. And what he said is, whatever you vividly imagine, ardently desire, sincerely believe, and enthusiastically act upon must inevitably come to pass. And I love that quote because it's very descriptive, it's very clear, and it's very real. And so if you want something to come to pass, right, which would be a goal or a dream, then there's a very predictable way to ensure that it comes to pass.
That's awesome. So say somebody, that's great, right? So I'm trying to be like the person that's thinking, okay, Chad, that sounds fantastic. Okay, but where you coach and train thousands of people, right? You've been in front of on stages, you're one-on-one with folks with the business that you are currently doing now. So you find someone that may or may not even believe that that's even possible. Is there a particular thing you encourage them to go do first to kind of get some of that belief put in place, so that way they can start taking that action?
Yeah,
that big
absolutely. So because you have to kind of assess, right, where someone is, where they believe. And so I'll put it this way: what I do with some people is I'm like, well, what are some of your biggest accomplishments you've ever accomplished already, right? And they might say, well, I graduated college, or I did this, or some people just don't know. And what's funny is if you really boil it down, right? Think about this. If you really boil it down to the fact that we're born, but the mere fact that in the race from the starting point, right? It was you against about 400 out of 1,000 little zygotes, right? In competition, and you won. So you're a champion just because you're born. So a lot of what we have to do is just remember that. And so it's kind of like the visual. I did this in Mexico one time, is I took like a dollar bill. Like when a new dollar bill is printed, it's a dollar bill, right? Or let's say $100 bill. It's a $100 bill. It's crisp, but you can put it in a toilet. You can smash it with a hammer. You can wad it up and throw it on the ground, and you can put it in mud, and you can dirty it all up and make it just nasty and make it smell and all that. But what's it worth? It's still worth $100, right? So a lot of it with people is just reminding them what they're worth and reminding them who they are. And as a Christian myself, I mean, you just go into the Bible in Ephesians 1, and it says right there, I mean, you're the heir to a throne, you're adopted, you're the son of a king. I mean, so just by the nature of knowing who you are, like, and for a lot of people, it's just like going back to that fact that we're champions just because we're born. So just go be a champion again. That's all we got to do.
So can you remember, assuming that it was either a person or a group or even an event that maybe have happened in your personal life, right? A story of some kind that you might be able to reflect back on to as you were having those discoveries in your own life, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, there's so many times where, it's like we have a perspective on things, right? And I'll give you two examples. So when I was in the military, I started off as an enlisted guy. I didn't have my degree, so I was an enlisted guy. And a couple of times I had the thought, maybe I'll finish my degree and try and become an officer. But I held officers in this much higher esteem. I was like, oh, they're just so much smarter than me. They're better looking than me. They're taller than me. I'm 5'7". I'm like, I just don't make the cut, right? I've just kind of counted myself out, which I think people do all the time for all kinds of reasons. And then I was at this school to become a sergeant. And at this school, there was a guy, Sergeant First Class Smith. And basically, when at the school, he said, Kneller, come up here. I need you to do a 5-minute presentation on the Army values. And I was like, sure. So I got up and I shared the best I could about the Army values. And he pulled me to the side later and he said, have you ever considered being an officer? Because the way you just briefed that to us was just as good as any officer I've ever met would have done. And those words sunk in deep. Those words made me feel for the first time like maybe I did have what it would take to be an officer. Maybe I really would. And so I remember doing that. And a second story is my wife and I went to this huge church. I mean, the church when we got there was probably 4,000. I think they grew it to like 6,000 over a couple of years they were there. So my wife ended up becoming friends with one of the number 2 guys, not the senior pastor, but the executive pastor. So number 2, she became friends with Becky, his wife. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm not qualified to hang out with this dude. Like he's a big guy, he's in charge of like 4,000 people, executive pastor in this church. Right. And we ended up becoming really, really close friends. And we ended up traveling all over the world. And I've done all kinds of cool things with him. And I've been a mentor to him just as much as he's been a mentor to me. So again, we count ourselves out because of the way we're raised, because of who we're around, our relationships. But the cool thing is that you can always change your mind. And Jim Rohn would say, if you will change, everything will change for you. And I love that. And that's what happened in my story. My first 15 years, you could say, was pretty normal, right? I grew up in a safe home, parents stayed together. So it was a pretty good childhood. But then for me at age 15, I discovered alcohol. And I was kind of a shy kid. So imagine I have a few drinks and now I feel like I feel powerful. Liquid courage is kicking in, right? And then I got involved in music, and I would be so nervous if I hadn't been drinking to sing. And so now I'd drink and I'd sing, and it just became and then it was the rock and roll lifestyle. So from age 15 to 30, I pretty much I pretty much ruined my life from age 15 to 30. And then at age 30, when I met my wife, and she was like, well, if you're going to be with me, buddy, you're going to clean it up. And so I had to start cleaning it up if I was going to keep her around. Right. And so she ended up being the best thing that happened to me. And I turned my life around and changed everything. But there was a season there where I felt like I couldn't be anybody, and then when I had to go through that process of looking back to all the damage I'd done and all the people that I'd hurt and all the bad choices and mistakes I made, I had to navigate through that, because that'll take a lot of people out too. Just thinking, oh, I screwed up too bad. I can't be used. There's nothing I can. I mean, you can imagine when you're singing in rock and roll, bars and jumping on tables and doing all this crazy stuff. And then the minute you get on a worship team and you're like, please don't strike me dead, Lord. I was waiting for the ceiling to open up one day. I was like, oh man, it's gonna start. Lightning's gonna come in here, and it didn't. I was like, oh, okay. I guess I can still be used. And I think that's the exact reason why God uses some of the misfits that he does in the Bible. Some of the worst people that normally people would say, how do you use them? They messed up too bad. Murderers and adulterers. And why did he pick those people? Well, to let us know that it's never too late for any of us, I think.
100%. So one thing so part of that story and coming out of your book, the idea of looking back, you connect the dots going backwards, right? You can always see kind of the path you're going down, and you just never know what the next experience or what that past experience is going to lead to moving forward, right? So it's even like our chance meeting just a few days ago, right? Or even a few weeks ago,
right?
You just never know where that's going to lead to. So all these experiences, all the things that we've had, whether they're good or bad, right? Whether they're perceived good or bad, you just don't know what that next thing is going to bring. So in your story, how you described how you went through that challenging period, right? That 15 to 30-ish, you realize that the words that you were even using, or even because you're a songwriter, you're not just a performer, you're a songwriter as well. So the words you were consuming, I don't know if it might not have been nightly, but definitely often, right? As you were performing, were molding the way your life was really developing in your outside world. And so how you've had to then pivot from those beliefs and from those challenges moving forward. So just, can you take a bit as far as like, I'm trying to really, the beliefs, right? People, the stories and their beliefs, right? They just keep themselves back from thinking that, like you just said, the past that I've had isn't going to allow me to have a better future. And just realizing that you're just one relationship, one opportunity, one conversation, one new idea, right? From an entirely different life that you don't even realize that's even possible standing there today. And just your story about that was really impactful when I was reading through your book. So I just was curious if you had any more insight on that.
Yeah. So it's such a powerful thing. The Bible says there's power of life and death in the tongue, right? And sometimes you'll run into someone and they'll say, man, everything that person touches turns to gold, right? We've all heard people say expressions like that. And what they're saying is that person has a mindset that's dialed in. And when they do something, they do it with excellence. And their expectation is invitation. So if you expect things to happen great, then you're inviting the things to happen great. Now, let's go to the other side of the coin. People are like, Murphy's Law, something bad can happen. It's going to happen to me, right? And they're expecting what? They're expecting bad things to happen to them. And guess what happens to them? Bad things, because that's what they're inviting. They're inviting bad things. So it's almost like, you take like one of the little scales, right? Where you put stuff on one side. So it's like, which way are you tipping the scale? Are you tipping the scale in your favor to have a better future? Or are you tipping your scale the other way to self-sabotage? Because a lot of people self-sabotage and they don't even know. They don't even know that they're doing it. So I've just learned, and a lot of this is it's just biblical truths, right? That there's power, life, and death in the tongue, and thoughts are things. Earl Nightingale, right? He had that. I know you love Earl Nightingale. He had the first ever spoken gold record. So first guy ever to speak, record it, put it on a record, and it sold 100,000 plus copies. First guy ever. And it's called The Strangest Secret in the World. And the strangest secret in the world is really not that strange, because it's you are what you mostly think about, right? And you think on that you are, what a man thinketh, so he is. Think on these things. There's all these books, Think and Grow Rich, right? It's what's happening in our mind. And sometimes it's even, it's the underlying beliefs, it's the philosophies. It's even when you're not intentionally thinking about something, your mind is going to work on whatever you're normally thinking about, right? Subconscious mind is constantly going. So you have to learn to take thoughts captive and remove, especially speaking it out loud. Because if you're speaking, the world was created by being spoken, right? So if you're speaking things like, I can't, maybe change it to a better word, to be like, I won't. And then you're taking ownership, right? Can't is a victim word. You're saying, I can't, it's just, you just kind of hear that whiner, when I hear people say, I can't, and instead say, I won't, and take ownership. Because the truth is when we realize that we are where we are in life right now because of the sum of all the decisions and the choices that we've made, right? When we realize that, now we have the power, because then we can say, okay, I'm in this I settled. I'm here where I'm at because of choices that I made. I'm not a victim of circumstance. I'm here because I chose to be here, one choice at a time. And now I understand, knowing that I can make new choices that can lead to a new result, that need to lead to a new life, versus someone who just places blame, and they blame on the, if that would change, I think, what does Jim Rohn call that? He says something like the not much list. How does that actually affect your life? Not much. If the government really changes, how will it affect you personally? Not much, right? And so we have this mentality, and Jim would say too, that it's like we're all in the sailboat. We all have our own sailboat. And most people just kind of are in their sailboat and they're waiting to see where the wind's going to blow them. But it's not the blowing of the wind that matters, because the opportunity will blow, the opportunities will come for us. The hard life will come to us. The disasters will come to us. So it's not so important the blowing of the wind, because the wind blows on everybody, but it's the set of the sail. And the set of the sail is the part we can control. It's a pretty cool relationship we have with God, because we plant the seeds and he grows the trees, right? So we plant. And if we're planting in other people, then we're adding value to other people's lives. There's just so much within that. I wrote you said you just read this book, Finding Happy, 10 Keys to Living an Extraordinary Life. And there's just little things in there that add up to be the big thing. That's what everybody wants. I call it Finding Happy because I figured everybody wants to be happy, right? I've never met anybody, hey, do you want to be happy? And like, no, I'd rather be depressed. If I wrote a book called Finding Depression, it probably wouldn't sell too hot, hopefully.
Yeah, not too hot.
Yeah. But so it's just those little things. And a lot of people don't know, and it's the slow fade, right? I mean, no person would let your neighbor come over and take their garbage can and dump it in your yard, right? But we'll listen to things, like music, like I used to listen to, just angry music. Well, why was I angry all the time? Because I was putting in garbage in, garbage out, right? I mean, what happens if you eat a extra size, super size meal every single day, 4 meals a day? Nothing good, right? You're gonna feel pretty sick. You're gonna blow up like a balloon, and you're going to be not happy at all. So it's the slight edge philosophy. It's the simple things, the little things over time that make all the difference. Simple errors in judgment that lead us down the wrong path, and the simple disciplines that lead us to the right path. And so we get to make those choices, and it doesn't happen overnight. Like I know all the 20-year-olds want it right now, quick and in a hurry, Burger King way, right? They want it my way.
There you go.
The fast food, it doesn't happen like that, but it will happen. It's just got to be very intentional.
So the idea of getting yourself around folks that have experienced those experiences, right? Those positive experiences, to keep the belief, the nudging, right? You were talking about, we keep making Jim Rohn references, right? So it's the nudging. It's, just a little bit going the wrong direction. And a few years from now, you'll be in a place that you do not want to be, right? You're washed up on the rocks. Whereas if you're just being nudged the other way in a positive format or a positive way, you can you'll live a life that you can hardly believe is even possible today, right? So it's the idea of just surrounding yourself with the right people and just believing, right? Believing that they have your interest in mind, and at the same time, just do what they say, right? It's being able to reproduce, right? Replicate the processes, the systems.
Absolutely.
That's kind of how I've always tried to live my life. And in businesses that I've tried, is find the systems, find the processes that are easy, replicable, right? And don't try to recreate the wheel, because there's no reason to do that.
Yeah, it's okay to be a copycat if you copy the right cat. Right? I mean, you find someone that's willing to teach you, you do what they do, and you get what they got. And I'm not saying you should find just one person. You should find many. Maybe you find that one person, you're like, if you're a mom and you're in Walmart and you see a mom there with, let's just say 5 children, and they're from ages 12 down to 2, and they're all respectful, and, they're holding the cart and they're saying, excuse me, mom, please, saying please and thank you. And you're walking by. I mean, would it kill you to invite that woman out for lunch to get some parenting tips? Right?
Yeah, she's obviously doing something right.
Now she might not have any money. You might not want to get any, business building advice from her. But I mean, shoot, would it be worth it to find out, why are your kids so respectful? She's probably going to say, oh, well, I read this little book called blah, blah, blah. And you can read a little book too, right? It's like, I know you talk a lot about, financial education, stuff like that. Well, Jim Rohn, in all those years he taught, there was one main book he would tell everybody to get: The Richest Man in Babylon. He was always just saying, he'd say, I've told 10,000 people to get it. You know how many got it? He's like, maybe 100. I was like, I get it. But see, you got to be teachable though, right? You can't go find the guy that has what you want and then go, oh, I got a better way than you to get there. That doesn't work out very well. So you got to get the book. You got to read it. You got to do the steps, understand the process.
That's when I was starting to be discovering this type of content and information, right? Back early in my journey, is like he would say something like that, right? So Challenge to Succeed, the Jim Rohn program, is probably my biggest thing that I always refer back to. And when I know exactly the quote you're talking about, right? You would mention the book and how many people would go out and get it. And it's like, not very many, very few, or how much does it cost to get a library card? It's free. You can't get much easier than free, but you can't get anybody to go get a library card to get the wealth of knowledge of all these people that are pouring their hearts and souls into these books, right? So that's what I started to do, as you're talking about, right? You find the mentors, the information, the knowledge, and then just go do it. It's not difficult, but at the same time, the discipline to do those things is what the difficulty part is, for sure. Staying with it when you might not see the results, like you said, the have it my way, the Burger King commercial, it's wanting it faster than what the reality actually is. But then having the faith and the people to come alongside you, right? Lock arms with folks that are out there getting it done, and then just go ply your own path, right? Set your sail to the wind that's blowing on you.
Right. Yeah. That's such a huge part, is the people, right? Because you have to, I've heard this and I believe it, but I've heard it said that you're the sum of the 5 people you hang out with the most, right? Typically have similar beliefs, you typically have similar lifestyles. And so you have to be aware of that and aware of what those people are doing to you. And are they calling the better man out, or the better woman out of people, or are they just keeping you in a spot, because a lot of people, it's like you've probably seen like the bucket of crabs analogy, right? Mm-hmm. If there's a bucket and there's one crab in there, he can climb out just fine. But if you're in a bucket full of crabs and you're trying to climb out, you might be trying to climb to get to a higher place, and you got your friends like, no, we like you just where you are. Come back down here to normal land with us. Get your head out of the clouds there, buddy. So you have to be aware, because that's what happens a lot of the time when we want to go to higher places and do more. Some of our friends feel like we're trying to leave them behind, and they don't like that. It makes them uncomfortable. So sometimes, some relationships need to be initiated, some need to be cultivated, and some need to be terminated. And that's just the reality.
Yeah, it can be a harsh reality, but at the same time, it is reality. I have had to experience that personally in my life. So it's those, Jim talks about the 5-minute friends, 5-hour friends, 5-week friends, or 5-day friends, right? And you just have to keep everybody in their particular buckets. And and if you take control of that, you'll get obviously control back of the thoughts and the ideas in your mind. And that whole crab out of the bucket analogy, right? I use that a lot with folks that I'm discussing, the idea that folks, as you begin to change, people aren't going to be comfortable necessarily with that. And they're always going to try to bring you back to what is comfortable for them, when in fact you're actually trying to grow, and you'll reach back and bring them out with you, right? It's not like you're leaving them for good. It's like, I'm going to try to go to a better place, and I want you to come with me. Let's go. But those folks sometimes don't necessarily understand that as you're in the process of going down that beginning part of that journey, for sure.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So one thing I want to pivot to is your part of the story about control. You mentioned control a few times in a few seconds ago, is what we were talking about there. And part of my story is that I realized that I wasn't in control of my life. I was in the corporate W-2, grinding away. Retail was my background. So it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you being in the military, I know your life was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you had very little flexibility with your life. You had a moment very similar to mine where it was like an epiphany. It's like realizing that, at the end of the day, all this effort, it's like, what is it really getting me to this destination, this vision that I've got for myself? Reading your story today, it's like I almost put myself back in my own position. So I was just hoping that you could kind of talk about that a little bit. With that day, you realized that you weren't in control of your life, and you wanted something bigger and better for yourself, for your family. You talk about generational wealth, right? Passing things down to your grandchildren's grandchildren, right? And I feel the same way, right? So just that control piece. Can you talk about that? And even talking about
it's been called,
realized that what you did about it.
Yeah, there's so many different reasons it would kind of take that that pivotal moment. I've heard it called the day that turns your life around. You're never have some people have a never again moment. It could be that moment where your reasons to do something just become so strong that your excuses to not do it are just they're gone. You're not worried about that anymore. So, my story is I'll just go back to 2012. So in 2012, I'd gone through all these steps. I started off as an Army soldier, and I shared a little bit about the guy that planted the seed, and I should become an officer. So I was in the military. I finished school, which is a whole nother. I took the 15-year route to get the 4-year college degree. Dropped out 3 times. Don't recommend it. If you go sign up for college, at least show up for your classes. So your parents get they know you're at least showing up, because if you don't show up for very long, it doesn't go well for you, right? So I didn't show up and dropped out a few different times and finished all that. So I finished that, and then I had to get accepted, and with a past and a history and all the stuff, I had to have all these waivers. Plus I was getting older, so I had to go through, it had to be some different miracles for me to even get accepted to become an officer. And so I did all that. So here I am in 2010, out the other end, and I hit all my goals I had in life at that point. It was just be an officer and work towards making 6 figures. I felt like if I could just make 6 figures, I could walk around proud of myself, take care of my family, be good. So that's 2012. Well, that year, a friend of mine, Chase, Nitro, that's his nickname, Nitro Prasnicki. He was a field artillery officer like me, and he got deployed, and within 3 days he hit IED and got blown up. And even though he had 2 broken legs, he walked himself to a stretcher, and then he died in the helicopter on his way to hospital. So this guy was a West Point quarterback. I mean, he was most loved guy in our class. We were going through everything. Just got married a few months before that. I mean, just a wonderful, wonderful guy. I mean, if you're going to put like Captain America on a person, he'd be like the guy you'd nominate as Captain America. You're like, this guy right here is young and powerful and bulletproof, and he's going to be fine. You know what I mean? Just a great leader, just all the things. And so that happened, and I was like, it was a wake-up call for me, because up until then I was like, yeah, none of my friends have been killed. We're field artillery guys. We kind of hang out in the background and blow stuff up that's, a mile away. And, the infantry guys are the ones that are really in danger. And so I was like, cool. And I knew my deployment was coming up too, because when I found out about this, I was at some pre-deployment training. So I get home from all that. So that's in the back of my mind. So now when you go, because before you deploy, you have to go and fill out, this legal paperwork to get your wills updated, and to have some very serious conversations with your family. Did they pull the plug, not pull the plug, all that kind of stuff. And so, we're going through that and got all that figured out. Well, now I'm supposed to take my kids to Disney World right before we deploy. So this is about 10 days before I'm supposed to go on leave. In the military, when you take time off, they call it leave, right? You're going on leave because you're leaving the military. Bye. You're leaving for a while. And so we had this big, everything's paid for, this thing. My daughter's 4, she's like, Daddy, she got that little sweet little 4-year-old voice. Daddy, you going to go see Mickey Mouse? She's just so excited. And then my commander, he forgot, he basically made a big mistake, and he forgot to schedule us for some training that we were supposed to do. And so now he said, we got to do this training, so you have to cancel your leaves. And I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, those are refundable tickets, right? And he's like, I'm sorry. We'll get you, we'll get you on leave as soon as you get back from deployment. I'm like, okay. I get it. My wife will get it. But my little 4-year-old girl, she's counting down the days. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Right. And so we ended up, not being able to go there. And so now I'm actually deployed. And on December 21st, I'm in an airport in Bagram. And I had Wi-Fi there. So normally I didn't have access to, communicate with my family, look online or social media or anything like that. But I'm in Bagram, and I look on my wife's Facebook page, and she's like, please pray for us. My youngest son, I'm on the way to the hospital with my youngest son. He's internally hemorrhaging, and he's already getting a transfusion. And I'm like, what the heck is going on at home? And I'm like getting hold of people, and the Red Cross, I ran across the Red Cross message the other day, saying, send him home. Very critical. His son's in critical condition, and they need soldier home right away. And so I've got this paper, and I'm in an airport. I'm like, just change my flight. And they're like, oh, we're so sorry, because you have to fly back the wrong way and turn in your weapon and fill out this paperwork. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so at that moment, and as soon as I flew back the wrong way, right? And then it took me 2 whole days, 48 hours, pretty much no sleep, to get back to the same spot I started to start my another 24-hour journey home. So it took me about 72 hours. So I got home the evening of Christmas Eve. So the good part of the story is my son had been released. He had the surgery. It went great. They figured out what was going on. He was actually released and home just a couple hours before I got home. And then my other 2 kids had no idea I was even coming home. So they were super surprised and happy that I was going to be able to spend Christmas with them. But you could imagine on the way home, I was in my mind, I had that breaking moment that you're talking about, where I was like, I have to get out of the military. I'm like, this will never happen again in my life. I'll never be stranded 7,300 miles from home, and my family wants me and I can't go straight home. Like, it's not happening. And so when we make a lot of decisions now to do things, as family, and just so that we know we'll be together, we won't be that far apart because of that. So that shaped my entire life. But what it also did is it really made me make the jump and get very serious about being an entrepreneur and owning my time and owning my finances. And so that was a moment. I mean, we came home from there. We had a little side business going. We were playing around, making a couple $1,000s with it. And within 101 days, we were making over $40,000 with that business. And then I dropped a packet, and you should have seen these. I had to get interviewed by each one of my commander, my battalion commander, my brigade commander, and they're all trying to keep me because I was a good officer in the military. And they're like, well, why would you leave? And I was like, you guys can't afford me. I was like, you just can't afford me anymore. Like, that's it. Like, I got to get out. Like, you can't make me an offer I can't refuse, because I've seen the pay and I'm making 4 times what the top people in the military are making. So I'm sorry. It's, and then they're just like, oh, we understand. They're like, what are you doing?
So that leads into what exactly is that, right? So we've had the discussion over the last few days as far as the misunderstanding about the opportunities and the businesses and the what you just described, right? How you basically went from zero, from getting started. You've had that entrepreneurial spirit and ideas, right, of businesses in the past. You came to it with some dedication, some determination, the will to win, right? All of the things required to succeed. And then you plugged all of that into a system or a process, right? And because of that, through some mentorship, through some skill development, you and your wife began to discover and build out this life that a lot of people would dream to have today, for sure. So can you go a little bit more about the opportunity and what it is, and just describe any details that you can give?
Yeah. So, and I'll kind of keep this in a more of a general framework, but the reality is about 90% of the population works for the other 10%. And everybody knows the 10% makes way more money than the 90%. So the next question we have to ask is, well, why wouldn't more of the 90%, trade in what they're doing to become part of the 10%? And the simple answer is that they just don't know. And they're not willing to learn, to get the education, because they're still sold on the old school plan, because it's what their family did. It's what their friend, we talk about the friends, right? So if you work 40 hours a week and you work for 40 years, and then you can retire and maybe get a pension. And that's the subscription that most of the world has applied to. And honestly, when I was young, I remember I was a construction worker making about $10 an hour. I was the guy, framing the walls for the basements and pouring the concrete. And I'd be doing these in these crazy, awesome neighborhoods. And I remember in my mind back then, I thought, man, that's a lot of doctors and lawyers that live in this neighborhood. Because that's all I thought. I was like, if you have a house like this, you got to be a doctor or you got to be a lawyer. Now, why would I think that? Because that's all I knew, right? No one ever came along and interrupted me and said, hey, I want to teach you how to do something. So a big part of this is finding a business, finding an industry, finding somebody who will take the time to teach you. And I love the industry of network marketing. And that's where my wife and I made a lot of money. We made, over $3 million in less than 10 years with the last company that we were with. And I love the industry because it's all about teaching mindset, building belief, helping people win. And it's just like, the more people you help, it's like the old Zig Ziglar saying, right? The more people you help get what they want, then by default, you get everything that you want. And that's really how the industry works. And it's so different than a traditional, corporate world where it's like it's like a fight, like it's a dog fight, right? To get your way to the top. Like it's almost like you're climbing a ladder and someone's trying to climb up behind you on the ladder. pass you on the ladder. So you're trying to stomp them down the ladder. You know, you're like, hey, you're not going to pass me, buddy. You're stomping them because it's just you're fighting over. You know, it's a true pyramid, right? Because there's like a CEO at the top, and then there's some managers, and there's some supervisors, and down here you have the employees, and then even below them now we have the temps, right? The temporary people that come in. And so it's like upside down when you're building something. It starts with just you, but then you get to build it with friends, and you build it with family. You know, and it's building and it's recruiting, and it's no different than some of the biggest organizations in the world. I mean, think about if you and I owned a college, are we going to want to have a bigger freshman class every year?
Ideally,
because, you know, you have the freshman class, and then you have a little smaller class. By the time you get to sophomore, your freshman doesn't go to a bigger sophomore class. You have a smaller sophomore, smaller junior, because you have leakage of people like me, right? They're like, I can't do 3 more years of this. I'm out of here. But the goal is you continue to recruit. You know, any real estate company, they want to recruit more real estate agents, you know, and if you're professional sports, you're constantly recruiting. And so that's what I love. Network marketing allows you to recruit, and you can earn, and you can create leverage. And that's what all the wealthy people in the world have, leverage. And when you have a job, a W-2 job, you're being leveraged, you know, and honestly, the government's leveraging you, because W-2 employees pay more taxes than anybody else. That's why Warren Buffett said, my secretary pays more in taxes than I do. And she makes like 30 grand a year, and he makes like, I don't know how much. So how does that work? Well, it's because you're playing at a whole different game. You got that game, that cash flow game behind you. That's such a great game for anybody that has never played it yet. And I love it because it's life. You're in the middle of that board on the hamster wheel. That's 90% of the population on the hamster wheel. And only very few get to play on that outer part, which is where the real fun begins. So I tell people is most people are enduring life. And if you don't know if you're enduring life or not, then just ask yourself this question. Are you as happy on a Monday morning as you are on a Friday night? And if the answer is no, then you've settled. And to some degree, you're enduring life. You're not enjoying it in the way you could be enjoying it if it was important enough to enjoy it. And so I just like to help more people enjoy their life more. That's what I feel called to do. And I believe everybody has some type of passion and some type of calling. And a lot of people just don't know what it is. So I like to come alongside people and help them, you know, in that season of life as much as I can, just add value to people and help them bridge that gap between where they are now and where they really want to be and where they wish they already were. So that brings me a lot of joy and happiness to do that.
And that's what it's all about, right? Having that control, taking those decisions. Before we hit record today, you already talked about the fantastic day you've had up to this point, right? We're recording about lunchtime here. And yeah, so you get to design the life that you choose, right? Versus it being chosen for you. I love the idea of, you know, the question, like you said, are you miserable on Monday morning or looking forward to Friday night, right? It's that really, I'm sure will hit home with a lot of folks, definitely after listening today, as far as thinking about like that good idea, you know, an opportunity isn't going to come by and just slap you upside the head and say, hey, pay attention. You've got to be ready, willing, and able, right? To put forth the effort, do the discipline, do the work. But at the same time, the opportunities are always out there. So if folks are out there going like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. This Chad guy, he's like the real deal. He's been there. He's done that. He's all, you know, doing all the good stuff that I love, all these things he's talking about with Jim Rohn, all this business opportunity. What are the best places for people to learn more about you, Chad, and even the opportunity that you have to present? Is there anything else any place where people should go to learn more?
Yeah, sure. I'm all over social media. So you could send me a message on Facebook, just first, last name. I think I'm the only one on there. Chad Kneller. That's Kneller. I've got this book out, Finding Happy. It's on Audible. You can go to findinghappybook.com if you want to buy one there. I'll sign that one. That one gets shipped straight from my house. So you can just go on Amazon and buy Amazon, Kindle, Audible, all the different kinds of things. And then my email, findinghappy, and then the number 1 at yahoo.com is a great way to get in touch with me. And yeah, those are, or just send out a carrier pigeon. That works too.
Exactly. Leave it to you to tie one on there at the very end. That's awesome. So Chad, this has been a lot of fun. Folks, take Chad up on his offers, right? Find his book. As I mentioned, I just finished reading that book today, this morning, before we got on the interview here. And it's packed full of wisdom, things that you can, just nuggets that you can take and implement right away. It's not it's deep enough to challenge you, but not hard enough where it's going to push you to the point where it's like you can't use the items in your life every day. So I really encourage you to go out there, get the Finding Happy book, look for Chad on the socials. If you're interested in learning more about the business opportunities, as you know, here on the Rich Mind Podcast, I'm always encouraging you, the entrepreneurship, taking control, starting a business. And the idea is you find processes, find systems, find places where you can plug into, get the support, have the ideas. You don't necessarily need to create your own products. You can piggyback and partner with other folks that are out there successful and just go along for the ride. You'll be surprised at how quickly you could advance if you just have faith with the people that you're trying to lock arms with. So folks, hopefully you found a lot of value in this conversation with me and Chad today. I look forward to connecting with you again very soon. And until the next episode, bye now. Thank you for joining me on the Rich Mind Podcast. I hope you found a ton of value in this episode. If so, I'd really appreciate a 5-star review, and you can also share it with your family and friends. And as my mentor Jim Roden shared with me, in order to have more, you must first become more. And in order to become more, you must work harder on yourself than you do on your job. So go out there today and work harder on yourself to become more and build the life of your dreams. Until next time, my friends.